And now, Gukesh D, you dog. Bishop takes f2, sacrificing the bishop. Gukesh, the audacity of this man in this game. Alright, heading back to move 1 in the game. Quang Liem playing as white, opens 1d4, and Gukesh D. How does the Indian Super GM / World Champion respond? He goes for the Indian defense with the move knight to f6. Oh, the irony. And by the way, this game literally just took place today in the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz tournament. Well, it's technically yesterday as you watch this video on day 1, but I digress. Anyways, one of the biggest tournaments in the world. Gukesh playing for a win as black with the Indian defense. Here we go. All right, Quang Liem. He goes for c4, the Queen's Gambit style move, and Gukesh e6, likely intending bishop b4 or d5, depending on what white does next. Now here, white goes knight f3. That is the absolute main line here for white. And now the best move in the main line for black is going to be d5, heading for the good old-fashioned QGD, the Queen's Gambit decline, trying to fight for control of the center and so on. But here, on move 3, Gukesh D, he does not go d5. He doesn't go b6. He does not go bishop b4. He does not play any of the standard moves here for black. In fact, on move 3, he busts out a move that is so rare, it is only played in 0.1% of games from this exact position. So what on earth is Gukesh D going to do here? He's going to play the move h6. Gukesh, you dog, the audacity. What on earth are you thinking? Why would you play this? Well, this move right here is sort of a Gukesh specialty. He plays it quite a bit as black when he's playing for a win. And the main idea is to play a waiting move and to try to throw white off his game, basically. Now here, Quang Liem, this guy knows what he is doing. He is not phased, completely unfazed, and he plays the move g3. Now, the point of h6, black is trying to guard g5 and stop bishop g5 ideas. However, if white just goes g3 in the spirit of the Catalan opening, the move h6 really doesn't do that much for black's position. All right, from here, Gukesh, bishop b4, giving the check. We have bishop d2, blocking the check, and then he goes back bishop to e7. Actually, a very common idea for black in this structure. Now, white, bishop g2, and black does finally go d5, transposing back to either a QGD or a Catalan, whichever way you want to think about it. All right, now, both sides castle. We have castles, queen c2, defending c4, very typical Catalan style stuff from both sides, and black does go c6, getting the famous pawn triangle in the middle of the board. Gukesh playing very, very solid, but so far white is at least a little bit better. He has very good pieces, and overall, the move h6 doesn't make that much sense for black so far in this game. Now, from here, white's got literally a million options to proceed. He can go rook d1, or bishop f4, or perhaps even like h4, or knight c3, or b3, or rook c1, or c takes d5, or b4, a4. Literally anything he wants to do right here is pretty much playable. In the game, he goes for perhaps the absolute main line for white in the closed Catalan. That involves going rook d1, and then bishop f4 next. So, rook d1 played in the game. Black goes knight bd7, the standard idea, and then bishop to f4. So, Quang Liem going for arguably the strongest overall setup for white's pieces. The rook on d1 is perfectly placed. The bishop controls this diagonal, and from here, white's idea may be knight to e5 and knight c3, finding excellent squares for his knights. Now, here, Gukesh. The main line for him is probably b6 intending bishop e7, but instead he plays an ultra-modern idea that is super trendy in high-level chess. That is the move here, a5 in the closed Catalan. The point being black, he might want to go a4, he also might want to go knight to e4, and then play moves like f5 and g5, getting actually a pretty big attack on the king side. Now, how is white going to respond? He begins a3, guarding b4, and now Gukesh, he's got a lot of options. Knight e4 is very interesting, as is knight to h5 or even just b6. Instead, though, he plays the move a4. Now, a4 is not exactly the strongest move here for black. However, it's very interesting. Black freeing up the a5 square for the queen. The queen may, in fact, fly out to a5, pressuring on the queen side. Gukesh finding very good squares for all of his pieces. Now, white, how does he want to proceed? Well, in the game, white goes knight to c3, finding a good square for the knight. However, black has the option of trading on c4, and white will have a very, very hard time trying to win back that pawn later in the game, although white would get a big center with, for example, d takes d4 and then the move e4 like this. Instead, in the game, queen to a5 was chosen by Gukesh, a good move by black. And now here on move 13, white makes the first major mistake of the game. He plays the move knight to e5, jumping in with the knight. Now, instead of this, the move e4 was much stronger here, gaining control of the center. Now, knight e5 is a very common idea in this closed Catalan. However, right here, it's simply not the best idea. And Gukesh, he finds the flaw in the plan. He takes on e5, knight takes e5, white takes back, and then knight d7. And now, look at this. The pawn on the e5 square, it's a little bit weak, and white's going to have a hard time defending, especially with the queen on the a5 square. If black takes on c4 with d takes c4, then the pawn on the e5 square is likely going to fall, and that would be an absolute disaster for white out of the openings. Now, from here, white takes on d5. We have c takes d5, and black takes back with the e pawn. E takes d5. Now, rook ac1, bringing out the rook, and black, knight to b6, eyeing c4 with that knight, a very good square for the knight, and also freeing up the light squared bishop to enter into the game on, say, g4, maybe f5, or maybe e6 later, depending on what white does from here. Now, Quang Liem, he goes e4, gaining space, a very solid idea, and black, bishop g4, attacking the rook on the e1 square, or sorry, d1. Now, Quang Liem, rook d3, the rook lift on the third rank, a solid idea, and black does go rook fd8, simply challenging white's rook on the soon-to-be open d-file if these pawns do fly off the board next. Now here, h3 is the move, pushing back that bishop. We have bishop to e6, defending d5, and then e takes and c takes. So far, it's a very typical Catalan-style game. Black's getting actually quite a bit of activity. He's got very good squares for his bishops, his knight, his queen, and so on. But on the other hand, white does have a very, very strong light squared bishop and pressure on d5. So overall, it's kind of a balanced middle game. All right, here, white goes queen d1, retreating and applying a little bit more pressure on that pawn on d5. Black, in response, bishop to f8, simply a quiet waiting move. Now here, bishop d2, retreating the bishop and putting some pressure on that queen on the a5 square. Now the threat could be, for example, knight takes d5 or knight e4, anything to open up the attack on the queen on a5. Gukesh, he sees this and he drops back, queen to a6, flying back one square with the queen and pressuring the very weak rook on the d3 square. And look at this rook. It can't go back as the bishop blocks d2. This rook is at risk of being completely misplaced in the middle game. Here, Quang Liem, he plays the move rook to d4, but this is a serious inaccuracy. And now, as we're seeing, the rook, where can it go if it's attacked? Gukesh D, he flies out with the bishop, bishop to c5, a very strong move, pressuring the rook. Where is the rook going to go? If it goes to, say, f4 or h4, I mean, you can't leave the rook on f4 or h4 for the entire game, or can you? Well, in the game, white simply goes rook to h4, there's nothing else, and the rook, it does pressure h6, but however, on the other hand, it could be completely misplaced later in the game if white is not careful. Now, Gukesh, he flies in with that knight, knight c4, pressuring b2, pressuring e5, a very simple but very, very strong attacking idea. And what can white do about it? Here, Quang Liem, he flies in with the knight, knight takes d5, winning the free pawn. But here, Gukesh, he finds the brilliant counterblow. Bishop takes f2. Gukesh, the audacity of this man, flying in with the bishop. It's a clean bishop sack. What on earth is he doing? Well, let's find out. In the game, the king takes, and then black takes on b2. Knight takes b2, threatening knight d3 check, hitting the king, and that would be super, super dangerous. All right, from here, white, knight e7, hits the king. The king slides over, king to f8, and then queen to c2, threatening the knight, and also squares like c5 and c7, a good multi-purpose attacking move. Now, from here, knight d3 hits the king, and also the rook on c1. Gukesh finding a very simple but very, very strong fork of the piece. The king It's got to go back. King G1 chosen in the game. And here, Gukesh, he finally makes a little bit of an inaccuracy. He's played almost flawless chess so far in this game, minus the ultra rare and slightly dubious idea of 3h6 in the opening, played 0.1% of the time. But beyond that, he's played a fantastic, and I mean fantastic game. And here, he makes one of the only mistakes of the entire game and plays the move King takes e7, which overall is simply not as strong as the alternative of taking on the c1 square. And white does slowly fight back in the game. We have king takes, then rook b1, sliding over with the rook, bishop b3, trying to block the b file, but now bishop b4 hits the king and activates this piece on a very good diagonal. Now the king slides back, king to e8, but the king being cut off on this diagonal. That is not what you want. You do not want your king isolated like this in the middle of the board. That is not good. All right, white, queen c7, flying in and threatening checkmate in one move. Of course, Gukesh, the world champion, is going to spot it, and he blocks the attack with the move rook d7. Now, where is the queen going to go? It goes all the way back to the c3 square, queen c3, and now Gukesh, queen b6, hits the king on the g1 square. Now, turns out taking on b4 is a little more accurate, but instead, queen b6 played in the game, hitting the king on the g1 square. Now, the king goes up to h2, king to h2, then we have knight takes, rook takes, and then queen to c7, offering the queen trade. Gukesh, he knows if we head for an endgame, black will be slightly better, as he does have the better pawn structure. Of course, white's pawn on the e5 square is a little bit weak, and that would give black a decent edge in the endgame. So here, Quang Liem, he keeps those queens on the board. Queen to e3, he slides over, maintaining the tension, but now Gukesh, queen to c2, he flies in with the queen, pressuring the rook on the b1 square, and also putting some pressure on the bishop on g2, and now the threat is simply rook d2, overloading the bishop on g2. That would be devastating. All right, white, queen c1, attacks the queen. The rook is defended by the queen on e3, therefore it is a good move, but now Gukesh, queen d2, he slides over again and once again offers the queen trade. And if you move the queen to, say, I don't know, e4, you lose the rook on c1. White here's got a very difficult choice. How do you defend against all of these threats? In the game, queen c5 was chosen, defending the rook, but now rook a d8. The triple battery of the rook, and the queen all lining up on the d file. Gukesh getting literally perfect centralization of his pieces. Now, rook c3, the rook lift, queen to a2, the queen slides over and vacates d2 for the other rook. Now, rook to f3, a fatal mistake in this game by Quang Liem, the super GM. And now, rook d2, the rook flies in, threatening mate in just 2 or 3 moves. White, queen b5, hits the king slides over, then queen to f1, trying to defend. But here, Gukesh D, he finds the finishing blow in this game. Simply rook takes g2, and here, Quang Liem, the super GM, he is forced to resign on the spot, and here's why. If you take the queen, or sorry, the rook with the queen like this, the move for black is rook to d2, and if you try to block the attack with the rook, you take the rook and then win the queen and win the game. And for that reason, his opponent must resign right now on the spot. There is simply no defense. Wow, what a game by Gukesh, and quite frankly, his ultra rare weird opening. Don't try this at home, kids. He plays the move 3h6, a seemingly bizarre waiting move, which actually turns out to be not that bad here in this exact position. What a game by Gukesh, and what a well-deserved victory. All right, guys, that is all for today. Now, real fast, show me some love. Comment down below whatever you want to comment. Please comment in this video, smash that like button. And while you're at it, if you want to learn directly from me, Dr. Mike Chess, and how to be a better online chess player, how to reach 2,000 ELO, and become a top 1% online player, all you have to do is go to school.com/chessmindset. That is my free online chess community /course/coaching program. I will personally help you out, analyze your games, give you free opening courses, do whatever it takes to help you reach 2,000 ELO in online chess. So head right there. The link's also down below in the pinned comment and in the description. So head right there. I'll see you there. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey. in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.